It was 2022. At the time, I was living in Oakland in the Bay Area, and I had driven up to visit my parents in Eureka for the weekend. If you've never driven along Highway 101 on the Northern California coast, let me tell you something. It's breathtaking during the day. At night, it turns into something else entirely. The road becomes a long, empty stretch of darkness. No cars, no signal, no lights. Just miles of silent highway cutting through forests and cliffs that you can't even see, but you can feel them watching. I left my parents' house around 8 p.m. on a Sunday. Looking back, that was my first mistake. I should have stayed the night, waited for morning, driven back when the sun was up and the world made sense again. But I had an early shift the next day, and I convinced myself I could handle the drive. I couldn't. The first couple of hours were uneventful, quiet but normal. The 101 eventually narrowed into a 2-lane road, the kind where one wrong move sends you off into nothing. That's how most of rural 101 is once you're far enough north. Somewhere near Trinidad, that's when everything changed. The fog rolled in. At first, it was light, harmless, just a thin veil drifting across the road. Then, within minutes, it thickened, not gradually, violently. Visibility dropped from clear to barely 20 feet ahead. My headlights didn't cut through it. They just reflected back at me, turning everything into a glowing white wall. It felt like driving inside a cloud or something worse. I slowed down to about 35 miles per hour, gripping the wheel tighter than I realized. Every instinct told me to pull over, to stop and wait it out. But there was nowhere to stop. No exits, no soldiers, just road and whatever was hiding beyond it. So I kept going. That's when the fog started messing with my head. Distances felt wrong. Time stretched. The road didn't feel real anymore. It was like I'd been driving in circles, even though I knew I hadn't. After what felt like forever, maybe 30 minutes, I saw something ahead. At first, it was just a shape, a darker patch in the fog, standing still on the side of the road. As I got closer, my stomach dropped. It was a person, a man. He was standing just off the shoulder, facing the road, completely motionless. No waving, no phone, no sign he needed help. Just standing there, waiting. I eased my foot off the gas as I approached him. Not because I wanted to help, but because something deep in my gut told me to be careful. The kind of instinct you don't question, the kind that keeps you alive. My headlights washed over him as I got closer. He didn't move, not even a flinch. No reaction to the light, no attempt to step back from the road. It was like he didn't even register that a car was approaching. That alone was wrong. But what made it worse was the way he was standing. Too still, too perfect, like he had been placed there. As I passed him, I turned my head just enough to get a better look. His face came into view for a split second, and somehow that made it even more unsettling. There was nothing obviously wrong with him. No blood, no wounds, no twisted expression, just blank, empty, like a person who wasn't really there. I kept driving. I told myself he probably had car trouble. Maybe his vehicle was somewhere further back in the fog and I just hadn't seen it. That made sense. It had to make sense, because the alternative, I didn't even want to think about it. But then, about 10 minutes later, I saw him again. At first, my brain refused to process it. Another figure standing off the side of the road. Same height, same build, same dark clothing, same unnatural stillness. But this time, he was on the opposite side, left instead of right. I actually said it out loud. What the hell? There was no way, no turns, no side roads, no possible way for him to get ahead of me. I was the only car out there, and yet, there he was, waiting again. This time, I didn't want to look. Every instinct screamed at me to keep my eyes forward, to pretend he wasn't there. But I couldn't help it. I needed to know. As I passed him, I turned my head, and that's when everything inside me dropped. He was looking directly at me, not turning slowly, not reacting naturally. His head snapped toward me the exact moment our eyes met. Too fast, too precise, too aware. Our eyes locked for a fraction of a second, but it felt like forever. There was something in his gaze, not confusion, not fear, recognition, like he had been waiting for me specifically. I jerked my eyes back to the road, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. I pressed down on the gas. Not too fast, the fog wouldn't allow it, but fast enough to put distance between me and whatever that was. The fog grew thicker, heavier, almost suffocating. I could barely see the center line anymore. My thoughts started slipping. Nothing felt real. And just as I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, my headlights caught something ahead. Someone standing directly in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded slightly on the damp pavement before coming to a complete stop, just a few feet away from him. My entire body went rigid. The figure stood dead center in the road. This time, he was wearing a hood. It hung low over his face, completely hiding it in shadow. Even with my headlights shining directly at him, I couldn't see anything beneath it. But somehow, I knew it was him. The same man, the same presence. He didn't move, didn't step aside, didn't even react to the fact that I had almost hit him. We just sat there, me inside the car, him in the road, a silent standoff in the middle of nowhere. The fog wrapped around us like something alive, swallowing every sound, every sense of distance. I could feel it then. Even without seeing his face, I could feel him staring at me. My hands were shaking as I flashed my high beams. Once, twice, 3 times. "Move!" I yelled, my voice cracking inside the car. No response. Nothing. It was like he wasn't human. Like he didn't understand what I was saying. Or worse, like he didn't care. Panic started rising in my chest. I didn't know what he wanted. I didn't know what he was. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay there. I shifted the car into reverse. My eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. And that's when my heart nearly stopped. There was someone behind me. A figure walking slowly toward my car, emerging from the fog, getting closer, step by step. I hadn't heard anything. No footsteps, no movement, nothing. But there he was, and just like the others, he was coming straight for me. "Holy shit!" I shouted it without thinking. My brain snapped into survival mode. I slammed the gear back into drive. I didn't care anymore. Didn't care about the road, the fog, or anything else. I just needed to get out. I jerked the wheel hard to the right, swerving into the opposite lane to get around the figure blocking the road. For a split second, I thought he might lunge at the car, but he didn't move. He just stood there as I drove past him. I thought I made it. I really did. But then, bam! Something slammed into the back of my car, hard, violent. The entire vehicle jolted forward and to the side. The sound was deafening, metal crunching, something bending, breaking. It wasn't a tap, it was a full-force impact. I gripped the wheel, fighting to keep control. My heart was racing so fast I could barely think. For a moment, I thought another car had hit me, that someone had been behind me the whole time. But when I looked in the mirror, there was nothing there. No headlights, no car, no people, nothing. The road behind me was empty, completely empty, like no one had ever been there at all. I didn't slow down. I couldn't. Whatever had just happened back there, whatever hit my car, I wasn't about to stop and find out. I pushed the car forward as fast as I safely could, my knuckles white against the steering wheel, my eyes locked onto the faint lines of the road barely visible through the suffocating fog. Every second felt stretched. Every shadow felt like it was moving. And the worst part? I kept expecting to see them again, standing in the road, in my mirrors, right behind me. But they never came back. Not again. Eventually, the fog began to thin, slowly at first, then all at once, like a curtain being pulled back. For the first time in what felt like hours, I could actually see the road ahead of me, the trees, the sky, reality. I reached the Highway 101 interchange, and just like that, it was over. Or at least, it should have been. As my breathing slowed and my mind started catching up with everything that had just happened, I tried to make sense of it. I needed an explanation, something logical, something real. And somehow, I found one. Or at least, I convinced myself I did. I told myself I had hallucinated it. All of it. The figures, the man in the road, the one behind me, everything. It made sense in a way. I had been driving for nearly 4 hours. I was exhausted, mentally drained, staring into thick fog the entire time, isolated, disoriented, alone. That kind of environment can mess with your brain. People hallucinate under far less pressure than that. So yeah, it wasn't impossible. But there was still one problem. The impact. I remembered it clearly. The force, the sound, the way the car jolted. That wasn't something you imagine. That was real. Still, I tried to explain it away. Maybe when I swerved, I hit something. A guardrail, a post, a mile marker, something solid that I didn't see in the fog. That had to be it. It had to be. By the time I got home, I was completely drained. All I wanted to do was go inside, collapse into bed, and forget the entire night ever happened. But before I went in, I walked to the back of my car. And that's when everything fell apart. The rear bumper was destroyed, crushed inward. A massive dent stretched across nearly the entire width of it, like something had slammed into me with incredible force. I just stood there, staring at it, for a long time. There was no paint transfer, no scratches from another vehicle, no evidence of what hit me, just damage, severe damage, which meant one thing. Something hit me, and if something hit me, then I didn't hallucinate everything. I reported it to the police the next day, not because I expected answers, but because I needed someone else to know. It's been 4 years since that night, and I've thought about it more times than I can count. I've gone over every possible explanation,
every logical scenario, every rational conclusion. And this is the one I've settled on. I hallucinated the figures, and in my panic, I hit something on the side of the road. That's the only explanation that makes sense. But there's one thing, one detail, that still doesn't sit right with me. How is it possible to hallucinate one part of an event while the other part is completely real? Because I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And deep down, I don't think it was just my imagination.
This happened just a few weeks ago. Spring break. I'm a senior in college now, and like every year, I went back to my hometown for the week. It's one of those places that sounds decent on paper, close to a city, but in reality, there's nothing there. No nightlife, no places to go, no one to see, just quiet streets and way too much time to think. The timing couldn't have been worse. None of my friends were home. Everyone I still talked to from high school either had classes or had already taken their spring break earlier in March, so I was alone, completely alone for a full week. I had also been trying to clean up my habits, cutting back on nicotine, alcohol too, and I knew how this kind of boredom could go. Either I'd fall back into bad habits, or I'd do something productive. So I made a plan. Every day, lift in the morning, run in the afternoon, keep myself busy, stay out of my own head. That's how I ended up going for a run that Tuesday. There's a route I used to run all the time back in high school, cross-country days. It's a perfect 3-mile loop. Starts at my house, cuts through the neighborhood for about a quarter mile, then leads into a narrow trail through a small patch of woods before looping back out onto the street just a block from where I started. I've run it hundreds of times, maybe more. I knew every turn, every dip, every inch of that trail. And the woods? That was always the best part. Soft ground, quiet air, no cars, no noise, just you and the sound of your own footsteps. I headed out around 5 p.m. The sun still had a couple of hours before setting, so I wasn't worried about it getting dark. But the moment I stepped outside, I noticed something. The fog. It was already there. Thick. Unnaturally thick. I stopped for a second, just looking around. Something about it felt off. Not normal. Not like any fog I'd seen before in that town, and I've lived there my whole life. Everything beyond maybe 30 or 40 feet was gone. Not faded. Gone. Swallowed by this pale, heavy haze. It almost didn't feel real. More like a filter. Like I had stepped into some kind of simulation or a dream that didn't want me there. I actually considered skipping the run, just going back inside. Something about the atmosphere felt wrong enough to justify it. But then I told myself I was overthinking. The trail is simple. One path, no forks, no way to get lost. I could practically run it blindfolded. So I started running. The first quarter mile through the neighborhood was fine. Quiet. Too quiet, maybe, but nothing unusual. Then I reached the entrance to the woods, and without really thinking about it, I stepped inside. The moment I crossed into the tree line, everything changed. The fog got thicker, heavier, darker, like the forest was holding it in, trapping it. My visibility dropped to maybe 15, 20 feet at most. The trail was still visible beneath my feet, but everything beyond that? Nothing. Just gray emptiness between the trees. And the silence? It wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt wrong, like the entire forest was holding its breath. The moment the window cracked open, it happened. Two hands shot out from the darkness. They slammed against the bottom of the window and forced it upward with terrifying strength. The glass rattled violently as the window flew open. A man in a black hoodie lunged forward, trying to climb into my room. My brain barely had time to process what was happening before pure instinct took over. I screamed, loud, uncontrollably. I started throwing punches at him, wild, desperate swings, anything to keep him back. My fists collided with his arms, his shoulders, his face, but he kept pushing forward. He didn't say a word. That made it worse. In a blind panic, I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, my desk lamp, and swung it as hard as I could. Crack! The lamp connected with his head. The man let out a low grunt and stumbled backward, losing his grip on the window. He fell outside, disappearing into the darkness for a split second. That was my chance. I rushed forward and slammed the window shut with all my strength, locking it instantly. My hands were shaking so badly I almost couldn't manage it. For a second, everything went silent. Then I saw him. Through the thin gaps in the blinds, I caught a glimpse of his shadowy figure as he got back up and ran. He sprinted across the yard and vanished into the darkness as if he had never been there at all. I stood there, frozen, barely able to breathe. The room felt colder than before, heavier. I didn't sleep that night, and to this day, I still think about one thing. What would have happened if I hadn't stopped him? At first, I thought I imagined it. Just a faint sound buried under my own breathing and footsteps. But then, I heard it again, clearer this time. I stopped. The silence around me felt unnatural, suffocating. And then, there it was, a sound, low, deep, dragging through the air like something heavy. The closest thing I can compare it to is a moan. But that's not quite right. It wasn't human, not exactly. It stretched too long, rose too slowly, fell too unnaturally. It would swell, then dip, then rise again, like a siren, but distorted, alive, and wrong. Every instinct in my body screamed the same thing: run. So I did. I turned and started running faster down the trail, my footsteps pounding harder now, breath-breaking rhythm. But the sound didn't stop. It followed me. No matter how fast I ran, it stayed the same distance behind me, not getting closer, not falling behind, just there, matching me. I glanced over my shoulder, once, twice, 3 times. Nothing, just fog, thick, endless fog swallowing everything behind me. But I could still hear it, that low, droning sound echoing through the trees like something was hunting me without needing to see me. My chest started to burn. My legs were getting heavy. I had already run over 4 miles at this point. I was exhausted, but I couldn't stop, because whatever was behind me wasn't getting tired. I pushed harder, faster, ignoring the pain building in my legs, ignoring the tightness in my lungs. The sound grew louder, not closer, just louder, like it was reacting to me, feeding off my panic. At one point, I almost lost my footing. My shoe slipped slightly on the damp dirt, and for a split second, I thought I was going down. If I fell, I knew I wouldn't get back up in time. I kept running, heart pounding, vision narrowing, everything around me blurring into gray and shadows. And then, finally, I saw it. The edge of the woods, the trail opening up ahead. I pushed through the last stretch,
nearly stumbling as I broke past the tree line and onto the street. I bent over, hands on my knees, gasping for air, my entire body shaking. The sound stopped, just like that. Gone. Silence. But something felt wrong. Slowly, I turned around and looked back into the woods.
I wish I hadn't turned around. The trail entrance stood just a few yards away, half swallowed by fog. The trees loomed like shadows, their outlines barely visible through the gray. For a second, I thought it was empty. Then I saw it, standing in the middle of the trail. At first, it didn't even look real. Just a shape, a darker mass inside the fog. Too still, too unnatural. My eyes strained, trying to make sense of it, trying to force it into something familiar, something human. But it wasn't. It was tall, way too tall. I'm 6'1", and whatever I was looking at had to be at least a full head taller than me, maybe more. Its form was wrong, not clearly defined, like its edges were blending into the fog itself. And it wasn't walking. It was swaying, slowly, gently, back and forth, like something hanging, or something breathing in a way that didn't belong in this world. A cold wave ran through my entire body. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I couldn't see its face, but I didn't need to. I could feel it. It was looking at me, not just in a general sense, directly at me. The kind of stare you feel in your bones, the kind that makes every instinct in your body scream that you are not safe. And then I realized something even worse. It hadn't followed me out of the woods. It had stopped right at the edge, like it couldn't cross or didn't need to. The fog behind it shifted slightly, curling around its shape like it was part of it, like it belonged there. That horrible sound I had heard before, the droning, rising noise, it didn't come back. But somehow, that made it worse, because now it was silent, watching, waiting for me to do something. I didn't give it the chance. The moment my body unlocked, I turned and ran. I didn't look back, not once. I ran all the way home, through the neighborhood, up my street, straight to my front door. I didn't stop until I was inside, door locked, lights on. Even then, I didn't feel safe. That was a few weeks ago. I'm back at school now, trying to focus on normal life again. Classes, friends, routine. But it's not working, because I can't stop thinking about that day, that thing, that sound. I told my parents what happened. They tried to explain it away, said it was probably just a tall person in the woods, maybe someone trying to mess with me. But I don't believe that. No person can move like that, sound like that, keep pace with someone running for miles without ever being seen. And no person is that tall. I don't know what I saw in those woods, and I don't think I ever will, but I know one thing for sure. It was real, and sometimes I still feel like it's out there, waiting. This happened about 6 years ago, late September. My friend, Edwin, and I had been planning this trip for almost 2 years, kayaking across Willapa Bay in Washington. If you've never heard of it, it's massive. A huge tidal estuary stretching for miles along the coast, quiet, isolated, surrounded by wetlands, oyster beds, and long, empty shorelines. On a clear day, it's peaceful, almost too peaceful. The weekend we chose, it wasn't clear, not even close. We launched early Saturday morning from a small put-in near Nakata. The fog was already thick when we got there, not unusual for the coast, but still heavy enough to make things feel off. Now, I need to make something clear. We weren't amateurs. We both grew up kayaking. Edwin had even worked as a guide during college. We knew what we were doing. We understood the water, the tides, navigation, all of it. So when we saw the fog, we didn't panic. We figured it would burn off. That's what coastal fog does. It rolls in overnight, hangs around for a bit, then disappears once the sun comes up. At least, that's what it's supposed to do. We pushed off anyway. The water was calm, almost unnaturally still. Our paddles dipped into the bay with soft, rhythmic splashes, each stroke echoing slightly in the thick air. And the fog, it wrapped around everything. We couldn't see more than 30, maybe 40 feet in any direction. Beyond that, nothing, just endless gray. It felt like we weren't even on water anymore, more like floating in empty space. We stayed close together, maybe 10, 15 feet apart, close enough to see each other, close enough to not lose track. Every few minutes, we checked our GPS and compass, adjusted our heading, made sure we were still on course toward Long Island. Everything was under control. At least, that's what we thought. For the first hour, nothing happened. No boats, no birds, no wind, just silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy, like it's pressing in on you from all sides. Then, around 9 a.m., I heard something.
At first, I thought it was Edwin. Just a slight change in rhythm. Maybe he adjusted his stroke or shifted his paddle in the water. But something about the sound didn't match. It was sharper, heavier. I turned my head slightly to the left. Edwin's paddle was resting across his kayak. He wasn't moving, which meant that sound didn't come from him. "You hear that?" he asked. His voice was low, tense. I nodded. We both stopped paddling. The silence rushed back in immediately, thick and suffocating. And then, there it was again. Splash, splash, splash. Slow, steady, measured. It wasn't the sound of a paddle. It was the sound of oars. There's a difference. If you've spent enough time on the water, you know it instantly. Paddles dip and slice. Oars pull, heavier, deeper, more deliberate. And this was definitely oars, which meant there was another boat out there, somewhere in the fog, off to our right. "Probably just another fisherman," Edwin said, trying to sound casual, trying to keep it normal. And yeah, that made sense. There are always people out on the bay. Kayakers, crabbers, small fishing boats checking lines. But something about it still felt wrong. We waited, listening. Normally, in low visibility, people call out. You announce yourself, let others know where you are. But whoever was out there
didn't say a word. The rowing continued, same pace, same rhythm, over and over again. Edwin cupped his hands around his mouth. "Hello?" he called out into the fog. No answer, not even a pause. The oars didn't slow, didn't stop, didn't change at all. It was like they didn't hear us, or worse, they were ignoring us. We exchanged a look, didn't say anything, but we both felt it. Something wasn't right. Still, we started paddling again, slow at first, then steady, figuring we'd eventually cross paths, or at least see them as the fog shifted. But as the minutes passed, something became very clear. That boat, wherever it was moving with us. Not getting closer, not drifting away, just staying there, off to our right, matching our speed perfectly. For 10 minutes, then 15, then 20, the same exact rhythm, over and over and over. It started getting into my head, that sound, so precise, so consistent, almost mechanical. I tried to rationalize it, told myself maybe they were just really experienced, keeping a perfect stroke. But no one is that consistent, not for that long, not without a single mistake. No variation, no pause, no shift, just perfect repetition. And the longer it went on, the more wrong it felt. By that point, neither of us was talking anymore. We didn't need to. That sound was doing all the talking for us. Splash, splash, splash. Still off to our right. Still perfectly in sync with our movement. Every few seconds, I found myself glancing over, staring into the fog, trying to catch even the faintest outline of the boat. Nothing. Just gray emptiness. But then, for a brief moment, the fog shifted. It didn't clear, not fully, just thinned. And through that thin break in the haze, I saw it. A boat. Small, wooden, dark, almost black, sitting low in the water. And inside it, a figure, seated at the oars. I couldn't make out any details. No face, no clothing, just a silhouette. Still, rowing. The oars moved slowly, deliberately through the water, dipping in, pulling back, over and over again. Then, just like that, the fog swallowed it again. Gone. "Did you see that?" I asked. "Yeah," Edwin replied quietly. "That was enough. That was all the confirmation we needed. We weren't imagining it. There was someone out there with us, and they had been there the entire time, watching, following." That's when the unease turned into something heavier, something sharper. Fear. "I don't like this," I said. "I think we should head back." Edwin didn't argue, not even a second. We both started turning our kayaks, angling toward where we believed the shoreline was. The problem was, in that kind of fog, believed wasn't good enough. Even with GPS, navigation gets tricky out there. The bay is full of shallow channels, shifting sandbars, mudflats that can trap you if you're not careful. And being stuck out there, with that thing, not an option. We paddled faster, more aggressively now, trying to get out. But the sound, it didn't go away. It stayed with us, still off to our right, still matching us. No matter how we changed direction, it adjusted, like it knew exactly where we were going, like it was guiding us, or hurting us. I didn't look again. I didn't want to, but I could feel it, that presence, just beyond the fog, close enough to hear, close enough to follow, but never close enough to fully see. And then, without warning, the fog began to lift. At first, it was subtle. The fog didn't disappear all at once. It just loosened. The thick gray wall around us began to thin, stretching outward, letting shapes slowly come back into existence. Visibility pushed out from 40 feet to 60, then 100. For the first time since we launched, we could actually see. And the very first thing I did was look to my right, where the rowing had been coming from. Nothing. No boat, no ripples, no movement, just open water. I turned behind us. Nothing there either. I scanned every direction I could. Left, right, ahead. Empty. The bay was completely deserted. The sound had stopped. Gone, like it had never existed. But that didn't make me feel better. It made everything worse, because now there was proof. Whatever had been out there with us was gone, and we had no idea where it went. I looked over at Edwin. He was already staring at me, and I could see it in his face. He was scared, more scared than I had ever seen him. Neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. We just kept paddling, straight toward shore. A few minutes later, land came into view, a narrow strip of beach cutting through the gray horizon. Relief hit me hard. We paddled faster, didn't care where we landed, didn't care how rough it was. We just needed to get out of the water. The moment we hit the shallows, I jumped out. The cold water surged up to my knees, but I barely felt it. I dragged my kayak onto the sand, breathing hard, trying to steady myself. For a minute or two, everything was quiet again. Just the distant sound of water, the faint wind. No rowing, no presence. I thought it was over. I was wrong. "Hey," Edwin said. His voice was different, tight, uneasy. "Come here." I followed him up the beach, and that's when I saw it. Footprints. Barefoot, leading out of the water. Fresh. You could still see the moisture pooled inside each step.
The sand darkened where the weight had pressed down. Whoever made them had just come out of the bay. But that wasn't the worst part. They didn't stop at the shore. The prints continued, up the beach, then turning slightly, following the shoreline for several yards before cutting toward the tree line and disappearing into the woods. I felt my stomach drop. I traced them back with my eyes, trying to see where they started. They came from further down the beach, meaning whoever it was had reached the shore before us, somehow. Even though we had been moving non-stop, even though we had a head start, didn't make sense. It couldn't. I started walking toward the direction the prints came from, drawn to it, needing to see. Suddenly, a hand grabbed my arm, hard. I turned. Edwin. "We're leaving," he said. His voice wasn't uncertain this time. It wasn't nervous. It was serious. Final. "I don't care what that is. We're done." Something in the way he said it snapped me out of whatever I was thinking. But it was already too late, because I had seen it. About 50 yards down the shoreline, a boat pulled up onto the sand at an angle. Small, wooden, dark. The same boat. I knew it, without a doubt. The same one I had seen through the fog. The oars were still inside, resting, silent, and there were no other footprints around it, just the single trail leading away into the woods.
I took a step toward it, instinctively, but Edwin pulled me back. "Now," he said. That was enough. We turned around and ran, back to the kayaks. We didn't speak, didn't look back. We shoved them into the water and paddled out as fast as we could. Neither of us stopped until we were far away from that shoreline, far enough to feel like we could breathe again. It's been 6 years, and I still think about that morning. I've tried to explain it, rationalize it, break it down into something that makes sense. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone was out there messing with us. But that doesn't explain everything. Because here's what I keep coming back to. We were on the water for over 2 hours. We changed direction multiple times. We made a direct line for shore once the fog lifted. And somehow, that boat got there before us. Whoever was rowing it reached land, walked along the shoreline, stopped exactly where we would land, and then disappeared into the woods. All before we even arrived. It's impossible. But we saw it. We heard it. And sometimes, I still hear that sound in my head. Splash, splash, splash.